Hello, Filiberto. It's very good pleasure to have you here. I will be having, in fact, I will be having a lot of questions for you. You've been moderating a panel about the healthcare innovation, so we're going to talk about it. First of all, from point of view, because you are helping, companies from small ones towards the big corporates about, innovation, how to put technological advancements into the structures, etc. So, tell me at the very beginning, what are the worst mistakes companies do at all when they think about technology and how to implement within their structures? Because I think many big corporates, the best, in fact the biggest companies around the world, they don't know shit about the technology and they do nothing to be friend with it. Really, and they are left behind by the other technological advantageous companies like Google, Facebook, etc.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure and an honor. Your question is actually a very interesting question. It's a complicated one, to the extent that there is always a misperception about innovation, and the misunderstanding is different for large corporation as it is for smaller corporation. So, larger corporation, they think they know the market, and they see the market through the current technological, social, and economical criteria. So when there is emerging new technologies, their mistake is often to disregard, because they have a framework which works for them. And many of those are leaders in their own market. So they achieve that leadership because of the framework they have. They don't understand that their framework is also what's going to kill them in the future.
They're not very flexible.
No, they're not flexible at all. Okay, because once you tap into something, you try to become very operational savvy. So you try to make as much money as possible. You try to milk the cow, which is normal, which is right. But then the true leaders in innovation are the ones who can put the framework aside and build something else in parallel. Smaller companies have another problem. They tend to be too technology focused. It's exciting, it's the bits and it's the bytes, and then they forget about the consumers, they forget about the customer, they forget that someone needs to be convinced and actually pay for the technology itself. So, in between of those, it's actually an interesting challenge.
But I think it's a good opportunity, for the marriage between both parties, allowing small ones to some kind integrate, well, not be assimilated by the bigger corporates, but to integrate and create value together. Those all incubators, acceleration programs, providing value for the big corporates from the small ones who know tech but have no idea about the structures.
And I think you're tapping on something significant. Of course, there is a lot of buzz about accelerators, incubators, and that matchmaking, that supply and demand of co-creating one for each other, it's actually what I think is driving it as much as possible. Of course, it's risky, because it's risky for both the startups and for the large corporations. First of all, because I have advised large companies on whether they should incubate or how to incubate, whether they should accelerate and how to accelerate. And I always tell them, watch out, because this is the first step to acknowledge you're not going to be innovate internally any longer. So you should do this, but you shouldn't kill all the other efforts.
Yeah, definitely.
And from a startup point of view, when we look at a lot of startups launch their own company because they want to do their own thing. And when you start getting accelerated incubator, you get investors, you get new bosses.
Yeah.
Who decide
money providers, big partners. Yeah.
Who decide what you do, when you do it, and very often how you do it. So you need to be able to strike a balance with that.
Okay. So and now because let's make some kind of precise questions now. Let's transfer to the topic of the panel you had, like healthcare, because I think like healthcare is now a very, very hot topic. Like everything's around healthcare because of the big data, because of machine learning, AI, because of EOT and how to implement all of that. Because this is the market that touches us everywhere, because this is our health. So, what are your thoughts about the future? Like, how will this whole market, when it comes to the healthcare, with backing from these, let's say, innovative, but pretty old, in fact, because machine learning and AI is not a new concept, will transform in next couple of years? And where are we heading? Like, what's the direction of the market now? Or from other side, what are the most important factors of it?
Indeed, what's the direction? Probably only God knows if you believe in God. Because
another one.
Because at the end of the day, there is so many vectors spinning it. It's difficult to know where it's landing. In fact, when we do this type of exercise, we focus on the vectors and we tell you the direction of, this is one of the dominant winds. Yeah. And then, of course, the combination of all winds is going to bring the sector in one direction or the other. Right now, it's really important to understand for our customers and for companies in general what's going to happen, and so that they can plan different scenarios. Now, in terms of the specific of the question, I think that clearly there is a lot of excitement about IoT. Consumer IoT, which is driving the remote and healthcare monitoring, but which is also fuel the telemedicine approach very quickly and very fast. Telemedicine has proven in the past 2 years very significant for healthcare operators, okay? Because it costs very little in the sense that it saves money at the end. It's an investment which very quickly returns. It reduces waiting care overall, no? So it improves the customer experience. And actually it's one of the few things that has a positive effect on the Net Promoter Score. So it's building brand for the operators, for the healthcare operators. So they're going to try to push as much as possible towards it, which is where the technology gets in. Augmented reality or virtual reality, for example. They've been proven very effective in the management of post-traumatic stress disorder, in the management of anxiety, stress-related, social isolation. So I think that there is a lot of work that can be done. Okay, of course, right now we have military, let's say, examples of this working. It's not mass market yet. So I see a lot of a space where a lot of startups can enter and develop applications for remote management. Telemedicine is going to become a lot about therapeutics. It's a lot about diagnostic right now, where of course a trade-off needs to be done. A face-to-face meeting has a benefit, but if I need to travel 200 kilometers to have a psychological session, maybe that's not the idea. So that's definitely going to have an impact. What emerges well from the panel discussion is the importance of big data. Surprisingly enough, what didn't emerge, it's an excitement that I expected about artificial intelligence. I expected it was going to be linked to everything. And I think that the issue is that it's kind of linking everything, but for the ones who are starting up now and entrepreneuring now, if you are not in AI, you don't really understand how you can benefit from it.
Yeah, definitely. And people, the biggest problem of the market is they think it's really top of the top technology that understand people and it's very intuitive, etc., which is not, because this is a simple machine learning when you have input-output. But from the other hand, because you've been talking about diagnosis, that's where it helps, right? When you put a patient that is, has some kind of a disease, and you can of course make, put it 3 doctors or 5 doctors to, try to analyze what's happening, or you put that for the algorithm.
I mean, it's,
and see it in the
and that's what's happened.
picture.
One example was provided by one of the panelists. Is actually very interesting. I wasn't aware of it.
Okay.
But with the reduced number of visits of a patient to the healthcare service, AI can actually help the doctor asking the right questions. So to do kind of a pre-diagnostic, helping them based on, of course, of the data of the patient, because you don't have the kind of frequency, you don't visit as much. So your own medical records are going to be
okay. So like for the
heavy.
Chatbots, who will eventually be this first frontier.
Chatbots, but as well as preparing the doctor on what they should be probing when the visit happens.
Through the analysis of the whole picture,
Exactly.
right? Okay.
To getting a more holistic, which of course it's helpful, it's convenient, it's reducing times, and it's improving, because one of the risks of reducing the visits is actually that you miss something.
Usually. That's how the world is created.
That's actually what the risk. So how do we avoid those risks in these new systems? And then, finally we had 2 other topics which are interesting in the panel, I think. One is the fact that everybody wants to see blockchain emerging as a technology for medical records. But there is also belief that this could happen only if a government gets involved, if there is enough critical mass for it to be. Or even multiple governments involved in it, which I thought was interesting, because we are asking actually the governments to use a technology which is disrupting how the money making process and printing process is actually happening. That's one aspect, and the last aspect is the importance of the digital ecosystem. So what's happening in healthcare is that because of accelerators and incubators, but because of also this intercompany relationship, open APIs are emerging. Okay, and these are very important because you have tons of data in different formats, and not all the data collectors and data providers will be able to use only the data in a meaningful way. You need to, so you have watches, you have wearables and so on and so forth. And you need to be able to combine all of this. Open APIs help for what is a trend also of IoT in general. It's the emergence of services that can actually coach you and train you and tell you what you should be doing with those data and what's best for you.
Don't you think, like from your expertise, when you're working with the big companies, I'm not talking about the companies only from the health sector, but in my point of view, they have a lot of data, but the way they manage the data, they are like years before the startups and anything. Because I think like the big companies really are not enough digitalized, and they do not have enough tools and understanding what they can do with the data. Because when you have data, that's where the whole machine learning process is involved, and they don't even try to get there. Like maybe from your perspective it's different, but I would like to know your opinion.
No, I agree with you, and I think that you need to understand how big data got into these companies. And it was an IT sort of push. And that's the IT department brought as far as it could. Now it's up to the product developers, to the marketers, to the commercial people to actually use the knowledge,
right,
recombine it, and make it unique for themselves. Sorry. And I think that there is a gap there. You know, we're still when we talk about the data scientist is someone who understands data, but that's not someone who necessarily can pitch an insight to someone who's in the business, to a marketer, to a product development, to a commercial guy, or to the CEO of the company. That's the gap that needs to be filled.
Yeah, exactly. And this is also when the healthcare comes up, because the hospitals, like private clinics, etc., they need to understand what to do with the data. So this medical doctor you mentioned before can be supported by the AI thing behind, and he could like provide more sophisticated way of treating people. And now tell me at the very ending, what in your perspective are like the big changes that are possibly coming from the technological advancement and changing within the companies, especially in the healthcare, and how it maybe, of course, because God only knows, will affect us as the people and society as a whole.
So big changes from a technological point of view as well.
Yeah, I mean like a big data and all this transformation within the companies, within the hospitals, how it will affect like a world from the point of society, from the point of customers, and what are the big changes you think they will appear?
Well, for example, one of the examples I talked about during this my presentation, it's of a Dutch company called Sensara, and they are basically an IoT company who collects data from existing devices. They have their own devices, and they profile it in a way which is very interesting, because they work with the Open University in the Netherlands, okay? And from there, they use the data to understand what could potentially happen to consumers. And so they can see patterns, for example, for elder consumers on social isolation. And why is that important? Because social isolation, it's linked to an early onset of dementia, Alzheimer, it's linked to post-traumatic stress disorder, to different anxiety issues. Yeah. So I think that where we are going is changes where data / technologies and medical expertise, for example, need to be together. That also requires a cultural change.
As always, right?
But I think that the technology is there already. So what is going to impact us is our ability to decide where we can draw a line for ourselves in an educated way. So I think that we're going to be doing less visits to clinics. Probably eventually we will be doing no visits to clinics at all, unless we actually need to be able to see a doctor really. But with the computing power of smartphone and applications that can be built around the house,
yeah, that's your clinic, right?
It's like they don't need to look at my face. They know exactly what I have. It's like as simple as that. So, and it's my ability to cope with the notion that actually that diagnostic is happening where I live, rather than me going somewhere. The credibility of that, it's a very important aspect, because when we look at the hospital, the clinic, the pharmacy, we have an expectation of performance, and which is traditional, which is coming from different things. So
you want to see the professor in the hospital.
You want to see someone who's dressed white, exactly. You know that he can't write on a prescription, that you can't read the prescription whatsoever. But those are the clues, those are the rituals.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's very important. Besides that, I think that eventually artificial intelligence is going to be able to provide, based on the data, a lot of those gaps that we talked about, technology versus medical insights. and it's going to find links that we couldn't ever imagine. So probably that's where I would be focused on.
Okay, so like breathing to do some sentence like transforming, going to the doctor to having like, well, environmental doctor within your house, and all analysis of your health, or well, because I think now the EOT, if we tag ourselves enough, we can provide the doctor that is somewhere else, let's say even abroad, with a sophisticated enough information about what's happening, or even from the other perspective, in the next few years, probably AI who will simply make an alert, okay, there's something wrong. You can ask doctor, I will tell you, but there is a doctor probably on the line.
You see, and it's already today, the company I was talking about, Sensara.
So that's what they do? Like
What they do, they can understand whether you're walking, whether you're sleeping,
Yep.
whether you're changing your toilet routine, whether you're eating with the right frequency. They have all that information, and they match that information through profiles, through existing profiles. Okay?
It's very important. Sorry.
No, but the next step is, those are the patterns we recognize. Maybe there is patterns which we are not aware of, and that's where AI plays a role.
Exactly, and this is the part we talked before. This is the part where this blockchain for the security comes, because there will be much more data. When you know what a human being is doing, like in every second of his life, you know how to sell to the human, you know how to market to the human, and this is exactly why the blockchain is crucial, I think. As well, let's say a guardian of all of it, because this is a significant amount of information that is very, very important for anyone.
And by the way, the truth to the matter is that the more data, the more sophisticated the technology, the less capable is the user to understand
yes.
what they are giving. You know, the recent
Yep.
Facebook story, it's just one example. you know?
Exactly.
Sometimes you sign forms and you don't understand what these forms, or you accept terms and
Yeah,
conditions.
this indifference of human. Yeah,
Voila.
that's what it is.
And that's where culture plays a role again. So our ability to provide a system which is more trustworthy, it's what's gonna make happen, because AI, otherwise people are going to push back.
Yeah, definitely.
Doctors are going to push back, because they will have to otherwise leave some of their mentions, maybe focusing on better questioning, but you know, it's a
process. It's a long process.
It's a long process, and it's a circle. It could be a vicious circle, or it could be a virtuous circle. So,
Well, we'll see, right? It will happen anyway. Well, thank you for coming from this interview. It was a great pleasure to have you here.
Very much.
And well, I think you're staying today, or you will be coming for the next day?
I'm staying today, and I'll be back tomorrow as well.
Great. So I hope we'll see each other again, and have a great one.